I never thought the woman I loved would turn my greatest act of devotion into a weapon against me. This is the story of how I poured everything I had into her dream and how she walked away the second it started paying off. But what she didn't know was that I still had cards to play, and I was ready to use every single one. Subscribe to my channel if you want to hear how I turned the tables on her in the end. My name is David, and I'm 43 years old. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. My father was a mechanic, my mother stayed home with us kids, and nobody ever had much money. Maybe that's why I always believed in saving and building things slowly. I met Jenna when I was 35 and she was 29. She was different from anyone I'd ever known. She had this restless energy, like every room was too small for her. She worked in marketing back then, and she'd always talk about starting her own event planning company someday. I liked her ambition. It made me feel like I was part of something bigger than just going to work, coming home, repeating the same routine. We dated for about a year before we moved in together. 2 years later, we got married in a little ceremony at a vineyard outside Salem. I thought we were building a life side by side, brick by brick. A couple years into our marriage, she started saying she couldn't stand her boss anymore and that she was ready to be her own boss. She had a plan to offer high-end corporate event planning, huge conferences, launch parties, that sort of thing. She had a logo mocked up, a website idea, all the right buzzwords. The only thing she didn't have was the money to make it real. I'd been careful with my finances since I was in my 20s. I had about $65,000 saved, plus a line of credit I could tap if we needed extra. When I told her I'd help her get started, she cried so hard she could barely talk. She kept saying she'd pay me back, that this was our future together. I believed her because I wanted to. For the first few months, the business was nothing but late nights and stress. She worked constantly, and I picked up the slack around the house. I told myself it would all be worth it. We'd be partners in every sense, and eventually we'd both reap the rewards. By the end of the first year, she'd landed a few big clients and had started making real money. She hired a couple assistants, she got her name out there. I was genuinely proud of her. I told everyone how hard she'd worked. Around that time, I noticed she was spending more evenings out networking. Sometimes she'd come home smelling like expensive whiskey. Other times she'd just stay at her office overnight. I wanted to believe she was just driven, that she was pouring herself into her dream the same way I'd poured my money into it. But there were little signs I couldn't ignore. She'd get defensive when I asked simple questions, like which client she'd been meeting or why she didn't answer her phone. She started guarding her laptop like it was full of state secrets. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was just insecure because she was finally successful. But late one night, when she was asleep, I opened her email. I wish I could say I was surprised by what I found. There were messages with a man named Eric, her so-called client. Some of them were about contracts, invoices, and venues. But buried in between were the real messages, the ones where she called him my love and thanked him for making her feel alive again. My stomach turned. I shut the laptop and just sat there in the dark, listening to her breathing. All I could think about was how I'd paid for everything that led her right into his arms. The office lease, the advertising, the fancy dinners she was charging to the company card. All of it came out of my savings. All of it was supposed to be our future. I didn't know what to do yet. Part of me wanted to wake her up and scream. Another part of me wanted to disappear. But something colder settled over me instead. If she thought she could take everything and leave me with nothing, she was about to find out she had underestimated me. The next morning, I watched her get dressed like nothing had happened. She asked if I'd mind picking up groceries because she'd be stuck at the office all day. I said sure, my voice so calm it scared me. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she loved me, and walked out the door. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, just staring at the table, thinking how quickly someone can flip your life upside down without even blinking. I decided right then I wasn't going to confront her until I understood exactly how deep this went. I wasn't about to give her a head start to cover her tracks or hide assets. I started with what I could see. I pulled up our shared banking app and went through every transaction for the past year. Thousands in dinners, hotels, spa days, all labeled client development. Then there were the transfers from the business account to her personal checking. I knew some of that was normal, she was paying herself a salary, but the amounts didn't add up to what she'd told me. I opened a spreadsheet and started logging every dollar. I also called my friend Brian, who's an accountant.
I didn't tell him the whole story yet, just that I thought there might be some irregularities with Jenna's business. He offered to take a look at the company's books, no charge. He owed me a favor from years ago when I lent him money to get through a divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me. Over the next week, I played the part of the supportive husband. I cooked dinner, I asked her how work was going, I listened to her stories about clients I was pretty sure didn't exist. Every time she smiled at me, it felt like a small death, but I kept my face neutral. Brian called me after he'd looked at her accounts. He said, "David, you're not crazy. There's a lot of money moving around in ways that don't make sense. Some of it's been paid out to accounts I can't trace." That was the push I needed to go further. I found the business card of a private investigator I'd once met at a charity golf tournament. Back then, I never imagined I'd need someone like him. His name was Leo. I called him and told him I needed to know who my wife was really spending her time with, where she was going, and if she was planning to leave me. He didn't flinch or ask for a lot of details. He just said, "I'll get you answers, but you have to be sure you want them." I was sure, more sure than I'd ever been about anything. I gave him Jenna's work schedule, her car description, photos. He said he'd start immediately. That night, she came home late again. I watched her slip her shoes off and pour herself a glass of wine. She looked tired, but satisfied, like she'd had a good day. She didn't notice me studying her, memorizing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she hummed under her breath. It was strange, realizing I didn't even know this version of her. The woman I'd loved had turned into someone else while I wasn't paying attention. A few days later, Leo sent me his first report. He'd followed her to a boutique hotel across town. She parked in the underground garage and went straight upstairs. An hour later, Eric showed up carrying an overnight bag. They didn't leave until morning. My hands were shaking when I closed the file. She'd lied so easily, so convincingly. She hadn't just stolen my money, she'd stolen the idea of who I thought she was. I kept reading, and the last line of the report said something I hadn't expected. Subject has mentioned to companion that she plans to file for divorce within the month. That hit me harder than any photo. She was going to blindside me. Take the business I funded, take whatever was left in the accounts, and walk away clean. That was when I stopped feeling like a victim. I knew I had one shot to protect what was mine. I called Brian again and asked how fast he could help me secure financial records. He said he'd start immediately. I told Leo to keep watching her. I wasn't going to let her see this coming. If she wanted to play dirty, I could too. But I'd play smarter.
I began preparing quietly, moving through each day like a ghost in my own life, while Jenna smiled and acted like nothing was off. She kept telling me how hard she was working, how the business was really growing, how the next 6 months could be huge for us. The way she said us made my stomach turn. I kept nodding and smiling, helping her clean the kitchen, taking her car for gas, telling her how proud I was. I recorded everything, every bank statement, every late return, every shift in how she spoke to me. Brian and I spent hours going over her financials. He found hidden payments, consultants who didn't exist, vendors with generic names. All of it pointed to money being funneled into personal accounts. My accounts, I noticed, were being slowly drained. Not fast enough to trigger alarm, but enough that I could see the strategy. Little by little, she was preparing to walk away and leave me holding a pile of lies. Leo kept sending reports, dinners, overnight stays, a weekend business trip to Scottsdale that was really a resort with her boyfriend. Eric was even helping her move money. She had told him everything. That's what burned me the most. She locked me out emotionally, but gave him access to everything. Our finances, her plans, our future. That made it clear. This wasn't just cheating. It was a coordinated exit. So I shifted gears. I went to a lawyer. Not the one we use for the business. A completely separate, discreet firm outside the city. I laid out everything. Our marriage, the business I helped fund, the documents, the infidelity. The attorney asked me what I wanted. I said, I want to walk away with what's mine, and I want her to know I was never the fool she thought I was. He told me we could build a case. Financial misappropriation, marital fraud, even grounds for an unequal asset split if we timed it right. But I had to stay quiet. No confrontations, no emotional outbursts. Just document everything and wait. And that's what I did. I started shifting some of the business-related accounts into my name, ones I had legal claim to.
The original seed money? That was from my personal savings. We had it in writing. I reread the agreement a dozen times, then had the lawyer rework it into a formal motion. I also started securing our shared assets. I moved half of the joint savings into a secure holding account under my name. Completely legal, just precautionary. I didn't touch her cards. I didn't cancel anything. I let her keep believing she had control. On the surface, everything looked normal. We had dinner, we watched Netflix, she kissed me goodnight. I looked at her and thought about how far we had drifted. I remembered helping her paint the walls of the boutique before launch. I remembered spending hours building the website she now bragged about. I remembered taking out a personal loan just to help her rent that stupid location. And now the same woman was plotting to vanish and leave me broke and broken. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I was done being the nice guy. Jenna had underestimated me. She thought I'd panic, lash out, fold. But I was waiting for the exact moment to pull the rug from under her. Leo gave me the final piece when he told me Jenna was planning to meet with a divorce attorney the following week. That was my trigger. I scheduled a private meeting with Brian and my attorney, and we finalized everything. Paperwork to freeze business assets temporarily, proof that her new boyfriend had been receiving company funds under fake invoices, legal requests for forensic financial audits. My attorney said, once we file this, she'll have to respond to the court. It'll freeze her ability to move funds or sell the business until discovery's over. I said, do it. The night before we filed, I looked at her sleeping next to me and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just closure. She had already left the marriage in her mind. All I was doing now was sealing the door behind her. Early next morning, the documents were submitted. Court motion, asset freeze, financial audit, requests for temporary restraining order on business fund movements. I sent nothing to Jenna. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I just waited. I knew when she'd find out, because Leo would be watching. Sure enough, just after 1 p.m., she left work in a hurry. Leo messaged me. She's crying in the car. Looks like she got the news. I stared at my phone for a long time and then set it down. I poured myself a drink. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time, she wasn't the only one holding the cards.
Jenna didn't come home that night. I didn't ask where she was. I didn't care. The silence in the house felt like a long-awaited exhale. I sat on the couch with a beer, letting the stillness settle over me like a blanket. No pretending, no fake small talk, no more watching her lie through her teeth while wearing my ring. The next morning, she stormed in, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. She was in full-blown panic mode. Eyes puffy, hair tied back like she hadn't slept. "What the hell did you do?" she shouted, tossing a thick manila envelope on the table. I didn't flinch. I told her calmly, I protected what's mine. She started ranting about how I was ruining her business, threatening her livelihood, sabotaging everything we built. I let her go on for a while. Then I said, "No, Jenna, you ruined it. You tried to walk away with everything while keeping me in the dark. You don't get to play the victim now." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. Maybe the version of me she thought I was, the quiet, supportive husband, the one who never asked questions, never made demands, maybe that guy was officially gone. She tried switching tactics. "We can fix this," she said, her voice softening. "You didn't need to go this far." I gave her a bitter smile. "You already made your choice. I'm just making mine now." She left again, this time quieter, and I knew she was scrambling. Her lawyer contacted mine the next day, demanding that we drop the asset freeze. We refused. Our motion was strong, the evidence was stronger. Payments to fake vendors, financial commingling with her boyfriend, concealed accounts. My lawyer said if this went to court, she'd lose most of it. I didn't want to humiliate her, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with the business I built. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and quiet satisfaction. For once, she wasn't the one calling the shots. Leo kept feeding me updates. Eric had ghosted her the moment the legal trouble started. The guy she thought would be her backup plan had vanished. Typical. Jenna started showing up to meetings alone, trying to play innocent, trying to find ways to untangle herself from the mess. She had no idea how deep the trail went. Every time she tried to pivot, we were 10 steps ahead. Brian and I had already drafted buyout proposals. She could either settle quietly, give up the business and walk with what little dignity she had left, or we could go to court and let the whole thing unravel in public. She fought. She cried. She threatened, but she had no leverage. The money trail didn't lie. The day she finally signed the agreement, I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just sat across the table and watched her scribble her name on the dotted line. That was the moment it became real. The business was mine. The money was secured. She was out. On her way out, she paused like she wanted to say something. Apologize, explain, beg. I don't know. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You should have been honest with me. I would have given you everything willingly, but you chose lies, so now you get nothing." She walked out without another word. I sat in that office for a long time after she left, not celebrating, not relieved, just absorbing everything. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The woman I loved had been gone long before this started. What remained was just cleanup. I closed the books on the business that night, officially changed the name, rebranded everything. She wouldn't profit from my work anymore. Brian helped finalize the transfer, and we agreed to celebrate later, but for now, I just wanted quiet. I went home, made myself a simple dinner, and sat in front of the window watching the city lights flicker like they had every night. But this time, they didn't feel like a blur. They felt like clarity. There were no more lies to uncover, no more games, just me, the truth, and a future that was finally mine to build without her.
A few weeks passed, and I barely heard a word from Jenna. It was like she vanished the moment she signed those papers, like she couldn't stand to exist in a world where she didn't have control. I'd see her name pop up in a few angry social media posts from people who had once praised her. Apparently, news about the fraud had leaked in whispers, and her reputation was taking a hit. I didn't spread the rumors. I didn't need to. People talk, especially when money's involved. The business was mine now, fully and legally, and with Brian's help, I'd already begun shifting things in a new direction. I kept most of the team, cleaned out the fake vendors, and quietly fixed what she broke. The numbers were strong again. But honestly, it wasn't even about the profit anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could stand without her, that her betrayal didn't define the end of me. One afternoon, I stopped by the coffee shop near our old apartment, the same place where she and I had first sketched out our dream on a napkin. The barista still remembered me. "Hey man, haven't seen you in a while. You good?" I told him I was better than I'd been in years, and it was true. There was still this dull ache sometimes, like a bruise that hadn't fully faded, but it didn't control me anymore. The pain was honest. Her love wasn't. I started seeing a therapist too, not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want to carry the weight of this quietly for the rest of my life. The first few sessions were hard. I kept telling myself I should have seen it sooner, should have protected myself better. But he told me something I kept coming back to. You loved her the way a good man does. Don't punish yourself for that. And maybe that was the closure I needed. One evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It was her, just a single line. "Do you ever think about what we had?" I stared at it for a while. There was no anger left, no longing, just a strange emptiness. I didn't respond. What was there to say? I did think about what we had, but only in the way you remember a favorite song that eventually starts to sound off key. Beautiful at first, then sad, then silent. I deleted the message and moved on. I wasn't going back, not even to look. A few months later, I hosted a small event for the business. Nothing flashy, just a gathering of partners, staff, and new clients. Brian raised a toast and clapped me on the back, saying, "Here's to taking back what's yours and building something better with it." People laughed and cheered, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged in the moment. Not in the past, not in regret, but in something solid, something earned. Jenna's chapter was over. She took my money, my trust, and my heart, but I built it back, every piece of it, stronger, smarter, and this time, mine alone.